In today's video, we're going to be talking about regressions and progressions and how it relates to your exercises and even your programming. A saying we really like in training is we must regress in order to progress. And what that means is that any given exercise or session, you've got to meet that where you're at in your ability level, and you have to either change load, you have to change the difficulty of the exercise, you may even have to cut that session in half. And what we really want folks to be thinking about is this the right exercise for me or is it not? Do I need to regress or progress so I can actually gain some momentum from my training? So how do we regress and progress our exercises? And what I want you all to start thinking about is outside of the normal parameters of obvious things like adding or reducing load to a barbell or a hangboard set or adding a harder boulder into your session. We also need to think about how our own individual unique strengths and weaknesses play out amongst our peers or in the things that we look at in our training. And so it might be engaging in something that you're just really weak at, and you might need to start at like a really regressed version. But if you tackle that for long enough, of course, working on all your strengths and other things, you can actually see that progress quite a long ways. Now let's dig into a little bit more of the specific examples of how we might do this in our own training. And so we'll stick to the 4 major movement patterns: push, pull, squat, hinge. And the way I want you all to think about this is there's an anchor exercise within each movement pattern. And so let's say the anchor exercise for the squat pattern is the air squat. Can you get in a squat stance, go up and down with your body weight without falling over, full range of motion? Great. So maybe an athlete needs to stay there for a while. Maybe that is really hard for them. So we go to the regression side and we add a TRX strap or some sort of bands where they can help assist their air squat. Maybe that still isn't too much of a progression and they need to squat to a bench and then get up whatever way they need to. So those are regression examples. Then we start to go to the other side of the anchor exercise and we're doing goblet squats. Maybe goblet squats are really easy. We can start doing barbell front squats. And the sky's the limit as far as what tools you have available to you and the unlimited variations of the exercise to get you where exactly you need to be and you can progress from. Most anchor press exercising involves probably a ground push-up, but I've coached a lot of athletes and taught a lot of classes. The ground push-up can be pretty challenging. It can be hard on the core, the shoulder strength, the ability to stay in that position. So we regress this one quite a bit. And the easiest regression for a push-up is inclining them on a bench, on a box, on a barbell, and a squat rack. Most squat racks have a lot of different holes where we can get that person at the exact right height where they're working hard, but not so easy and not so hard that they can't actually move on from that training. That's an easy regression for the push-up. And we could be at bodyweight push-up variations for quite some time before we even consider adding load. And then, some people can rattle off plenty of push-ups and it's just not hard. We'll do one-arm push-ups with an inclined bench or a bar. We have dumbbell bench press. We have regular bench press. We can start thinking about pressing weight up overhead. The hinge pattern, the anchor exercise for the hinge patterns, is a kettlebell deadlift. So we're talking about the hamstrings, the glutes, the low back. Can someone take some moderately heavy load and get into a good hinge position, pick it up, reverse the movement without any mobility issues or strain on the hamstrings or strain on the low back? Great, that's a great anchor hinge exercise. If that doesn't work or we don't even want to consider adding load to that, we regress the hinge exercise by looking at maybe doing glute bridges. So they're laying supine on their back, they dig their heels into the ground, they move their hips up to the sky, and they come back down. For some people, that's quite challenging. We might work into a single leg glute bridge before we even add load. For some people, doing a regular kettlebell deadlift is pretty easy. And so the way we would progress that is adding load to a barbell. Maybe we're doing some explosive hinge work like a kettlebell swing. So those are really easy ways to see where we can regress and progress. And that one, probably more than any movement pattern, needs to stay in the regression for a while because it's not a very natural way to move. Moving on to the pull pattern, the anchor exercise is going to be the body weight pull-up. Once that starts to feel really easy for a climber, we quite naturally can add load to make that feel a little bit harder. But we can also progress this by doing offset pull-ups, so hanging a towel around a pull-up bar and doing these offset pull-ups, so almost like assisted one arms. Now, if the bodyweight pull-up starts to feel really quite challenging for someone, we're going to regress that in a couple different ways. It might be all the way down to the TRX inverted row. Now we've changed to this horizontal pattern, just like the dumbbell row, but if we want to stay in that vertical or overhead pulling regression from the pull-up, we can add resistance bands. You can find the thickness of the resistance band that will assist you to be able to do the prescribed sets and reps until it starts to feel easy. And then you can slowly start to make that feel harder with less resistance on those bands, eventually arriving at your bodyweight pull-up. Regressions and progressions can have a couple of different lenses, and we just have to come back to what is the goal of this session? What is the goal of my training block? What's the goal for my season? And where I think progression can be met with maybe the wrong lens is that we're just chasing fatigue, or we're chasing a longer session, or we're chasing this pump. And so if we're talking about the strength realm, we're talking anywhere between 0 or 10 seconds. So if you think about that in reps, somewhere in the 5 to 8 reps is strength. As soon as you start pushing into 12 or 15, say, of body weight pull-ups, I'd say let's go back to 5 reps and add some load, or maybe start to work on some one-arm pulling. If we're talking about this middle ground, this power endurance, we're talking about anywhere up to about 2 minutes after that 10-second mark. So people think of route 4x4s or these kind of more interval-based or strength endurance body weight or strength sessions. And then after that, after 2 minutes, we're talking about more of this aerobic type fitness where we can't push heavy loads because we can't push them for that long. So those progressions and regressions usually relates to strength, but they can also progress and regress in your duration of your sessions or how many boulders you're doing. But you really got to come back to, I can't progress and regress all of those things at the same time. I've got to just stick to what the goal of the session is. And then you can kind of play with what the season needs for you. Like, do you need more power endurance? Okay, I'm going to get away from progressing my weights. I'm going to progress it in a different way. It's important to remember that regressions and progressions are vital to any athletic development or any climber's training. It can be equally frustrating and amazing when you start to engage in this process, but it's really important to remember that you might be undercooking the stimulus and you might also be overcooking the stimulus, and you've got to figure out where that perfect temperature is or intensity is to be able to see some progression in your training, stay away from injury, and stay away from the dreaded plateau.